UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson want to keep some key pieces of evidence out of his upcoming murder trial. Now, the defense team argues items found in Mangione's backpack were uncovered without a search warrant, including a pistol, silencer, and a notebook. But prosecutors say the search was legal. Let's bring in CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman live from outside that courthouse in downtown Manhattan. Katrina, today the defense team took issue with the recent release of a video showing the shooting of Brian Thompson. What do we hear about that?
So the defense made a statement in court today, and specifically what they take issue with is that the prosecution didn't just release this short piece of footage where you can see Brian Thompson being shot. They released almost 2.5 hours of CCTV footage. Now, we had not seen all of that in court. The defense points this out. They say that this wasn't brought up with any witnesses on the stand. They didn't know that this entire thing was going to be released. In it, you see the shooting of Brian Thompson. You see it being responded to, him being loaded into an ambulance. They believe that all of this is prejudicial to Luigi Mangione. They say that it's very unusual for it to be released. The whole point of the suppression hearing that we've been in is that they don't want certain evidence to go before a jury. So for them to have so much coming out in the public in a way sort of defeats the purpose of why we're here.
Just before sunrise in the heart of Manhattan, one of the most powerful men in the American healthcare industry stepped out of a luxury hotel. And within seconds, he was lying on the sidewalk, shot dead in cold blood. There were no warning signs, no struggle, no robbery. The gunman walked up, fired with precision, and disappeared into the early morning streets as if he had rehearsed it 100 times. But what investigators found at the scene made the case even more disturbing. Lying next to the body were cartridge cases with words carved into them. Delay, deny, depose. 3 words that seemed less like random markings and more like a message. A message directed not just at the victim, but at an entire industry. The man who had just been killed was Brian Thompson, the CEO of UnitedHealthcare, or one of the largest health insurance companies in the United States. Within hours, the shooting became national news. Within days, it became something much bigger than a murder investigation. Because when police finally tracked down the suspect, they didn't just find a weapon, they found a handwritten letter, fake identities, a 3D printed gun, and a motive that would divide the entire country. Some people called it a brutal assassination, others called it revenge against a broken system, and as the investigation unfolded, the question was no longer just who pulled the trigger, but why so many people seemed to understand it. Before we go deeper into this shocking case, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like this video, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. True crime stories like this take time to uncover, and your support helps bring every detail to light. The morning of December 4th, 2024, started like any other cold winter morning in Midtown Manhattan. The streets around 6th Avenue were quiet, the kind of quiet that only exists before the city fully wakes up. A few taxis rolled past the tall glass buildings, hotel staff prepared for another busy day, and security guards stood outside the entrance of the New York Hilton Midtown, watching the early crowd come and go. Inside the hotel, Brian Thompson had just finished preparing for the day ahead. As the CEO of UnitedHealthcare, his schedule was always packed, especially when he was in New York. Meetings, conferences, private discussions with executives, everything about his life moved fast, controlled, and carefully planned. People who worked with him described him as disciplined, focused, and extremely private. He was not the kind of man who attracted attention in public, even though his position made him one of the most powerful figures in the American healthcare industry. That morning, nothing seemed out of place. Shortly after sunrise, Thompson walked toward the hotel entrance. Security cameras later showed him stepping outside alone, dressed in a dark coat, moving calmly toward the sidewalk as if it were just another ordinary moment in a very ordinary day. There were no crowds waiting, no reporters, no visible threats. Just another executive leaving a hotel in the middle of Manhattan. Then within seconds, everything changed. From across the street, a man wearing a mask approached quickly but without panic. Witnesses would later say the movement looked deliberate, almost rehearsed. The man didn't shout. He didn't run. He walked straight toward Thompson, raised a handgun fitted with a suppressor, and fired multiple shots at close range. The sound was not loud enough to cause instant chaos. Some people nearby didn't even realize what had happened at first. But Thompson collapsed onto the pavement, motionless, as the gunman turned and disappeared down the street before anyone could react. By the time hotel staff rushed outside, the shooter was gone. Emergency services arrived within minutes, but it was already too late. Brian Thompson, one of the most influential executives in the American health insurance system, was dead on the sidewalk outside one of the busiest hotels in New York City. At first, investigators treated the scene like any other homicide. Police secured the area, questioned witnesses. Yowen began reviewing security footage from nearby buildings. But as officers searched the ground near Thompson's body, they found something that immediately told them this was not a random act of violence. Next to the cartridge cases used in the shooting were words that had been carefully inscribed into the metal. Delay, deny, depose. The detectives at the scene looked at each other, confused at first, then uneasy. Those words were not random. Anyone familiar with the American health insurance system knew exactly what they meant. They were terms often used by critics to describe how insurance companies reject claims, delay treatments, and fight lawsuits. It was the first sign that this murder might have been planned as a message, not just a crime. Within hours, the news spread across the country. Some major networks interrupted their morning programs to report that the CEO of UnitedHealthcare had been shot and killed in Manhattan. The story exploded online almost immediately. Social media filled with speculation, anger, shock, and arguments about the healthcare industry. Some people expressed sympathy for Thompson and his family. Others focused on the words found at the scene, asking what kind of person would leave a message like that after committing murder. Investigators quickly learned that Thompson had received threats in the past. His family later confirmed that he had been warned about possible danger because of his position. As the head of one of the largest health insurance companies in the United States, he had become a target for criticism from people who believed the industry cared more about profits than patients. Still, and no one expected something like this. Police began reviewing surveillance footage from every camera near the hotel. After hours of searching, they finally found a clear image of the suspect. The video showed a man wearing a mask, a hooded jacket and gloves, moving through the street just minutes before the shooting. He appeared calm, almost too calm, as if he knew exactly where to go and exactly how long he had. The footage also showed something else that worried investigators. The suspect had not acted like someone who panicked after committing a crime. He walked away at a steady pace, disappeared into the city, and left almost no trace behind. That level of control suggested planning, careful planning. And the more detectives looked into the case, the more it started to feel less like a sudden act of violence, more like something that had been building for a long time. By the end of that day, the New York Police Department, federal agents, and multiple investigative teams were all working the same case. The killing of Brian Thompson was no longer just a homicide investigation. It had become a national priority. Because whoever pulled the trigger hadn't just killed a man, he had sent a message to an entire system. And somewhere the person responsible was still out there, watching the news, knowing the whole country was now looking for him. By the end of December 4th, the investigation had already spread far beyond Manhattan. What started as a shooting outside a hotel was now being handled by multiple agencies, including federal investigators, because nothing about the crime looked ordinary. The message left on the cartridge cases, the precision of the attack, and the status of the victim all pointed to one conclusion. This had been planned long before that morning. Detectives spent hours going through security footage from every camera around the New York Hilton Midtown, street cameras, hotel cameras, traffic cameras, even footage from nearby stores. In a city like New York, almost every step is recorded somewhere, and investigators knew the shooter had to be on video. Late that night, they found him. A masked man walking calmly down the street just minutes before the shooting. He wore a dark hooded jacket, gloves and a backpack. His face was covered, but his movements stood out. He didn't look nervous, he didn't look lost. He moved like someone who knew exactly where he was going. Even more disturbing, the footage showed him waiting near the hotel entrance for several minutes, as if he knew the exact moment Brian Thompson would walk outside. That detail changed everything. This was not random, this was not an accident. Someone had studied Thompson's schedule. As the video spread among investigators, the search for the suspect began to move faster. Police released descriptions to other states, airports were alerted, and federal agents joined the case. The man in the footage had disappeared into one of the largest cities in the world, but detectives believed he had not acted alone. Or at least, not without planning that left clues behind. While the search continued, another discovery made the case even more intense. And investigators learned that Brian Thompson had received threats before the shooting. His family told police that he had been warned about possible danger because of his role as CEO of UnitedHealthcare. The company had faced heavy criticism for years, especially over rejected insurance claims and delays in medical approvals. Online, people often blamed large insurance companies for life-changing decisions about treatment and coverage. At first, the threats had been taken seriously, but nothing had ever happened. Until now. As news of the killing spread across the country, reactions were unlike anything investigators had seen before. Normally, when a high-profile executive is murdered, the public response is shock and sympathy. But this time, the reaction was divided. Some people were horrified by the violence. Others were angry at the healthcare system, and on social media, arguments exploded almost instantly. People shared stories about denied claims, expensive treatments, and frustration with insurance companies. Others warned that nothing could justify murder. The case stopped being just about a crime and started becoming a national debate. And that made finding the suspect even more urgent. 5 days passed with no arrest. Then, on December 9th, the case took a sudden turn hundreds of miles away from New York City. In Altoona, Pennsylvania, local police received a report about a suspicious man at a public location. The man appeared nervous, carrying a bag, and according to reports, someone thought he looked similar to the suspect shown in the news. Officers approached him carefully, not knowing what they might be dealing with. Or when they searched him, what they found immediately raised alarms. Inside his belongings was a handgun that looked unusual. Investigators later said it appeared to be a 3D printed pistol, along with a 3D printed suppressor, the same kind of weapon believed to have been used in the Manhattan shooting. But that wasn't all. Police also found multiple identification cards with different names, an American passport, and documents that didn't seem to match each other. It looked like the man had been traveling under false identities. Then they found something else. A handwritten letter. According to authorities, the letter contained criticism of the American healthcare system, complaints about insurance companies, and references to corporate greed. And the words in the letter sounded similar to the message left at the crime scene. The same anger, the same frustration, the same belief that the system was harming people. At that moment, officers realized they might have just stopped the man everyone in the country was looking for. The suspect identified himself as Luigi Mangione, 26 years old. When his fingerprints were checked, investigators made another discovery. The prints matched partial smudged fingerprints that had been found near the shooting scene in New York. Within hours, the quiet arrest in Pennsylvania became national news. The man accused of killing one of the most powerful healthcare executives in America was now in custody. But the case was far from over, because the more authorities learned about Luigi Mangione, the more disturbing the story became. At his background, the letter he carried, the weapon he allegedly used, and the message left at the crime scene all suggested that this was not just a personal attack. It looked like something bigger, something planned not only to kill, but to make a statement. And as Mangione was brought to court for the first time, prosecutors began preparing charges that could put him in prison for the rest of his life. Or, possibly, something even more serious. What investigators still needed to prove was the most important question of all, not just how the crime happened, but why he believed he had to do it. When Luigi Mangione was brought back to New York, the case officially moved from a manhunt to a courtroom battle, but the story only became more intense. By the time he appeared before a judge, the entire country already knew his name. The news channels replayed the footage of the shooting over and over. Analysts argued about his motive, and social media was filled with opinions that were more divided than anyone expected. Prosecutors wasted no time announcing the charges. Mangione was accused of first-degree murder, weapons offenses, stalking, and additional federal crimes connected to the killing of Brian Thompson. Investigators described the attack as deliberate, calculated, and carried out with the clear intention of sending a message. They pointed to the words carved into the cartridge cases, the handwritten letter found at the time of his arrest, and the weapon they believed he used. But what shocked many people was the terrorism-related charge that was added to the case. Authorities argued that the killing was not just about one man. All they believed the act was meant to intimidate, to influence, and to send fear through an entire industry. According to prosecutors, the message left at the scene suggested that the attack was connected to anger toward the health insurance system, something that made the case different from most murders. Mangione pleaded not guilty. His defense team immediately pushed back, arguing that the charges were excessive and that the prosecution was trying to turn the case into something political. They challenged the evidence, questioned the motive, and fought against the possibility of the death penalty, which federal prosecutors had considered because of the seriousness of the crime. For months, the case moved slowly through the courts, but outside the courtroom, the story was only getting louder. Every new hearing brought more attention. Every document released created more arguments. Every update divided the public even further. Polls began to show something unusual. While most Americans said the killing was wrong, a large number of people also said they believed problems in the healthcare system played a role in what happened. Some blamed corporate greed, others blamed the suspect himself. And online, the reactions became even more extreme. Some posts showed sympathy for Brian Thompson and his family. Others openly criticized the insurance industry. And a small but loud group even praised the suspect, saying the crime exposed frustrations that had been building for years. For investigators and prosecutors, this made the case even more sensitive. It was no longer just about proving who pulled the trigger. It had become a case watched by millions. With every decision examined, every ruling debated, and every detail discussed across the country. In 2025, one of the biggest moments came when the terrorism-related murder charge in the state case was dismissed. The decision surprised many people, but it did not mean Mangione was free. He still faced second-degree murder charges along with federal charges that could keep him in prison for the rest of his life. Then another major ruling came in early 2026. A judge dismissed 2 federal charges and ruled that prosecutors could not seek the death penalty against Mangione. The decision changed the direction of the case again. What had once looked like a possible death penalty trial was now shaping into a long legal fight that could last years. But even as the court battles continued, one thing never changed: the question of why. So why would a 26-year-old man plan an attack like this? Why leave a message on the cartridge cases? Why carry a letter criticizing the healthcare system? And why did the case create such strong reactions across the country? Investigators believe the answer lies in the motive they described from the beginning. According to authorities, Mangione saw the health insurance industry as something harmful, something he believed was hurting people, and something he wanted to make a statement against. Whether that belief explains the crime or not is something the court will decide, but the message he left behind ensured that the killing would never be seen as just another homicide. Brian Thompson's death did more than start a murder investigation. It started a national conversation about power, responsibility, and anger inside a system that affects millions of people every day. And that is why this case is still being followed, still being argued, and still being talked about long after the gunshots outside that Manhattan hotel. Because in the end, this story is not only about a CEO who was killed, and not only about the man accused of pulling the trigger. It is about what happens when frustration turns into violence, when a message turns into a crime, and when one moment on a cold December morning changes the lives of everyone involved forever. If you found this case shocking, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who follows true crime stories. These real cases take time to uncover, and your support helps keep the stories coming. And before you leave, tell me in the comments, do you think this was just a murder? Are you or a crime meant to send a message?